So, good morning, and thank you all so much for joining us today. Um, Today's session is going to be run by Andrew Varley, who is the CEO of the London-based charity St Vincent's Family Project. The project is one of the charities within the Daughters of Charity Services group. So we're very happy to have Andrew here with us today. He's going to share with us or give us a bit of an insight into how the project is responding to the cost of living crisis and supporting families who are hit hard by the crisis. So, Andrew, I will hand over to you.
I'm free now to speak. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I think I might have spoken last year, so you've obviously got very short memories of how much I waffle and go on. So thank you for giving me another chance to speak. So just in terms of a reminder, we're based in central Westminster. You can't see, but over there is Westminster Abbey. Recently, we've had huge occasions going on. We've had the Prime Minister election just to my left there, and of course the Queen Elizabeth's funeral and memorial service just to my right. So it's just a reminder of why we're here in all this kind of wealth and power is within Westminster itself, although there are huge areas of wealth and history, there are pockets of deprivation as well, particularly around if anybody knows the area, sort of Pimlico area. So if you kind of did a walk from here as to Pimlico, you go past most of the families we support where they live. I mean, Westminster does particularly badly around homelessness, as you would imagine, being in the centre of London. Housing affordability is very bad. Employment. One of the things that we see a lot that isn't kind of covered in some of the stats around multiple deprivation is isolation. A lot of the families we work with come from very different communities. Almost half the families we work with don't have English as a first language. So although, we kind of don't nearly, it doesn't usually get classified as a need, it is something that families experience. So I just want to kind of give that as the background. We are a community for any family with children from 0 to 5 to come into our projects. We have play areas, there's lots of space for relaxation and fun. So if you're a parent and you have an active 2-year-old and you desperately need to get them out of the house, this is the place where anybody can come. Within that, we provide support to families who are on low incomes and or have other issues. And I kind of wanted to emphasize the correlation between being on a low income and or other issues, because although we're talking about poverty, a lot of people here will understand the correlation between poverty and things like mental health and domestic violence. So here's a bit where I move my hands around. So while one rises, there's likely to be an increase in the other. So and that forms part of our thinking about how we're going to respond to the current crisis. So we provide, our focus is working with people on low incomes or in poverty, and it always has been. I was talking to one of the other CEOs yesterday about what we really do, and what we really do is try to bring a long-term solution to that. The work we provide is around developing families' resilience. So to some extent, it's supporting people despite poverty. We're not a provider of income. We don't give out grants or anything. But what we can do is make the experience of families better, help them with relationships, so that whatever goes on, they survive. And some of the qualities that they develop are sustainable. So once their children are in school, become teenagers, and all the other kind of things that happen during life, you know, the relationships that form the kind of strength for parenting is still there. So, you know, there's I suppose there's a little bit of saying, well, we're just doing what we always do. We'll carry on doing what we always do. Our focus will be on long-term support, and helping families to become better within themselves. I suppose short-term, what we would normally do, I suppose, really is help families stabilize. So if you have somebody who's in a crisis all over the place, we do provide support and stop things getting worse. So in terms of the current crisis, I mean, I was looking at trying to pick up some stats, and I started this last week, and then over the week, information changes every day. So I just saw something saying that the average increase in energy bill will be 27% this month. 5 minutes later, I looked at something else and it was higher. So it's really, really difficult to keep up. In Westminster, the last thing I saw was a quarter of households will be affected. And although I said that, you know, poverty is something we deal with, it feels that this is a bit different. And it's all very well me saying, oh, well, we do all these courses and programs and therapy to help families develop. If, you know, somebody's in such a crisis, they can't deal with all that, we need to do a bit more. So part of me is saying, we do this already, we're already working with families in poverty, but we do have to think about doing something different. I mean, at the moment, it feels a bit like it hasn't really started. You know, I think I noticed yesterday as I cycled in, my fingers were freezing cold. The weather is getting colder. It's going to start very soon, I think. But, you know, families have been, I'd say that the overwhelming feeling that we've got is of kind of hopelessness. If you think, you know, when the cost of living crisis started hitting the headlines, we were just coming out of COVID. So people had survived or coped during that period. And when we started seeing families, you know, it was a sense of, well, what more can we do? I think at the time I was talking to Rihanna, and you know, some families had found some stores where you could buy things discounted, lower than Lidl, and I forgot the names of them. I'm sure there's some other stores as well. But people were already, you know, doing things like cutting back on treats for their children, just already thinking about saving. You know, coming up to the summer, we had a lot of families asking for support towards school uniforms, and though, you know, quite a lot of the families here have, you know, it's a project for young children. We also do have families who have older children, so they still have the, you know, to deal with buying school uniforms and all the sports equipment and things they need as well. And that kind of comes back to the, you know, the sort of the pressures on the family as parents. You know, we have young parents new and feeling they can't do what they think they should be doing for their children. And that's kind of where the parenting support comes in, really. It helps in terms of developing self-esteem without necessarily being a parent who can do everything. It's finding boundaries in the relationship, and developing confidence. So, you know, this all kind of forms our thinking in what we should be doing in terms of responding to the crisis. So to some extent, it's kind of repeating what we already do and being confident we have a really effective model. You know, I suppose One of the things that the charities do is look for support where it's needed, and it's not necessarily about finding new ideas and projects. It's about taking the model we have that works and spreading it. But as I said, you know, if families are going to be destitute, we need to do something else. We're a small charity, we can't do everything. And one of the things that we've been looking to do is develop our networks and improve our partnership working to support families, especially around advice and signposting and legal advice. A lot of the networks that were around during COVID kind of separated a bit, and that some of the networking wasn't happening as much. So it's been a bit of a push to pull those together. So we're currently going to have, well, we have today actually, citizens advice coming in to see families. We've got a family solicitor coming in, and we're going to be developing some training packages for staff and volunteers. One thing we won't be doing is we won't be becoming advice services. We'll do a lot of the hand-holding, signposting, quick responses, but rather than trying to do everything, it's better for us to bring in other services and be part of the advice kind of forums. We have partnered St Mary Le Bone Educational Trust already, and we're providing grants to families for school uniforms. We are looking to, with other agencies in Westminster, try to do a bit more on school uniforms. There's very little coordination. They're really expensive. Some schools will give out old uniforms, some will sell them at a low cost. So I'm working with the Mary Le Bone Trust and partners to try and develop something a bit more strategic locally, so more families can benefit those. And that makes a huge difference because start of the winter, it's families are forking out for those. There's lots of practical things we're trying to do. I should say, actually, one of the things that's been a challenge for us is, relating to COVID, is actually accessing getting families back in again. During the up to March, we still operated a controlled environment. So we had to manage people coming into the building. So we face masks, appointment-based systems. And that meant the numbers of families we're working to had kind of reduced a little bit over the couple of years. And we were tending to work with the most, the most vulnerable families. So after COVID, there were, there are lots of families out there who didn't know about us, new families, who hadn't been out of their door for 2 years. So as well as kind of, part of dealing with the crisis was to get out and outreach families again. So we did that back in Easter. And I think families are now coming back. So, part of the response is getting people into the building, being aware of our services. We've got we've got some winter coats to give out. We've got some winter coats for people. So we're trying to run some events to bring more families into the project. The end of last year, I think we worked with 66 families, but we now kind of reached our 100 figure again. So we're looking to again double that over the year so we can work with more people. So in terms of, I said, sort of practical things, we're doing more in terms of helping families understand their rights, making sure the information is out there, all the preventative stuff that we can do. We're looking to provide more donations. again, a kind of hangover of COVID was that some of the stores that we relied on for donations had closed. So the Disney store, which was great for toys, obviously, that stopped. We lost somebody at John Lewis's, so we know don't get things from John Lewis's. So at the start of the year, we had a table of donations which was empty. So we had to. We're now looking for more donations from people. We made some links, and we're going to try and do those. So looking at my notes, we already had relationships, working relationships with the local food bank and the Westminster Abbey Pantry, so we could refer families for low-cost food. And although that doesn't directly affect, does things that directly affects fuel costs, it's kind of hard to deal directly with fuel costs without giving people vouchers or money. So we're trying to cover everything around costs. What we will be doing is we're providing more lunches, particularly during the colder months. During the summer, we took part in summer events and had lunches for families, and we'll do that again at half term and hopefully at Christmas. And we have a relationship with Pret a Manger as well, so we give out some free foods as well. We're going to, in the winter months, we're going to open longer. I wouldn't say this is the warmest building there is. Got my jumper on already. But we'll normally we families go around 2:30 because having older children, a lot of them have to go off and pick up those. But we'll open till 5 and give people a little bit longer to stay in the warm, say they're heating. We have a great washing machine. We will offer that to families when we're not using it. We'll have an appointment-based system, I guess, and let them use that. We're providing free creche, and we provide it for families who have parents who go across the Abbey Centre and do some vocational training. Again, kind of thinking more the sort of long-term move out of poverty. So I mean, these are where we are now. I'm kind of throwing things out because a lot of it is learning as we go along. So we think we have a model for dealing with surviving long-term poverty and other issues, but we're kind of getting better at dealing with the kind of crisis response. I mean, I'm kind of interested to listen to myself. I'm never interested to listen to myself, but see where we are in a year's time, how we've dealt with it. Probably what I've said, some of the things I've said now, and some of the thinking is going to be different because we would have gone through a big learning curve. I think one of the things that we really want to do is, this is bloody miserable, and I think part of what we want to do is to bring some joy to families as well. It's not going to be, hopefully, just coming to us isn't about relief. It's real pleasure, having a feeling of community. We're already started planning because it's only a couple of months away, Christmas. So we'll do our fundraising. We'll get some toys and gifts for families. We'll take them on trips. We'll do a grotto. We've got the half term planned. We're going to do the same throughout the year as well. One of the happy thing for us in this month, even though we've had lots of distractions around events going on, is families are really happy coming here. It's a really nice atmosphere. We've got some good new students, volunteers, and the same old faces to a few of you as well. We're still around, and families are telling us it's like their second family. I hear that so often now, and I kind of think, have we said that to them, and they just kind of stuck in their head, but they're saying it without any, prompting. yeah, so that's kind of where we are. It's moving as we go along. I'm sure I'll Google again and find some other figures around the crisis. They, in terms of anxieties and concerns, a lot of it is around, not just around the practical things of paying bills and things, but just on the physical health and mental health of families and children. And there's lots of evidence to show that things like domestic violence rise when there's an increase in poverty or in poorer families. And I think we're going to be dealing a lot more with that as we go along. So, some of those things I've talked about, the focus on poverty, that we'll still do that, but I can, my concern is that side of it as well. So we've still kind of grown our therapy model. We grew that over COVID as a response to COVID. So mental health is still an issue. Maybe we need to think more about the response to domestic violence. There are other specialist services, and we don't see ourselves as specialists, but there will be survivors and who are coming in, and there are. We have staff and volunteers who have to pay bills as well. We haven't kind of forgotten those. As a small charity, we're limited to what we can do, but we have, at the start of the year, we did increase salaries to the then cost of living, which I forgot it was at that time. It's significantly more now. We did some job evaluations last year, so people are kind of okay, but we're kind of looking at other benefits as well that we can possibly provide to staff and be flexible. That could include just providing lunches as well, and that includes our volunteers as well. I'm talking about the staff, but we have as many volunteers as we do staff, a lot of them from local families themselves, and students as well. So there's everybody's being affected in some way. So looking at my notes, don't see anything else. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So thank you for letting me ramble on every year, my therapy session.
Thank you so much, Andy. I had a list of questions I wanted to ask you, and I think you've answered every single one of them as you went through. So I really, that was great. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? Please feel free to wave your hand or put up Dee.
Andrew actually mentioned quite a few issues that are seriously impacting on families. They're all interlinked. So, Andrew, I'm sure you actually try your absolute best, and all your newsletters are joyful. The colours of the children and all the playing and everything is just so joyous. But when you come across things like domestic violence, do you have a specialist there? I doubt it. Or do you signpost people? When you are talking to somebody and the children are playing and they gain your, the confidence with you, and all sorts of things tumble out, how do you then relay all this to other agencies that can help them?
We're not a specialist, as you say. So in terms of specialist help, we would refer. We do work with agencies around that. I mean, part of our role really, I think, is to broker those relationships, because we particularly get families from communities where talking about domestic violence in the community is difficult, or even in their own families. So a lot of what we do is helping families settle, feel comfortable, and being open to talk to us. So, and that's by trying to create a welcoming space that's diverse, giving people time to settle. What we don't do, and which is why we're terrible at stats and things, we don't bombard people as they walk through the door to give us information. We'll take some basic details of, in case something happens, if their children go missing or if they go missing, so we contact somebody. but then we let people get comfortable. So you can have somebody there for 6 months, and then they start to feel safe to talk about those sort of issues. So we have the kind of the practical leaps to get specialist support, but really the role, I think, is to make people feel comfortable to take that step to work with other agencies. And some of it is a bit about, well, fear about social services and their intervention. So by that stage, people are comfortable with us, and we've done that. So yeah, I don't know if that quite answered the question.
Well, it does, because I empathize with you, because I worked in education, and the situation is you come across potentially dangerous things, and they're half telling you the truth, and it's a dangerous situation. You want to actually almost refer to police or social services, but that's what they don't want you to do. So you're in a real dilemma there. So I'm just wondering how you cope with that.
Yeah, I mean, if we do have to exercise our legal responsibility to report something, then we just have to do that. I mean, I think we've got enough experience really and support amongst us to do that. A lot of it is just doing it and being confident. We've rarely lost a family because of a referral. We've mostly been able to keep them within the support. The one last year who decided not to carry on engaging with us when we made a referral, but it's unusual. We usually stay okay with the families. To be honest, there's not a lot of places to go to in Westminster, so families quite like to come back, and they've made friends, and there's all that side. So we usually okay.
Yeah. Well done.
Thanks, Dee. Sister Franca? Oh, you're on mute, Sister Franca.
Thank you very much for your inputs. Severally, you mentioned that all you do is done in practical ways. I must affirm that and remind you that that's what Vincent de Paul was about all the time, because he talks about concrete charity, and that's what you are about. I'm most interested in the work that you do with the family. And you made a statement about helping the family to develop a sense of resilience amidst domestic violence. My experience of working with families for some period since I came to London is that most of the time, the wife and the children are really the victim amidst domestic violence, because the man goes out, and then sometimes comes back late and doesn't make any connection with the wife and the children. So is there a way that your program can include the whole family within the situation of a domestic violence, so that each party can take responsibility for what leads to domestic violence? The crisis of high cost of living is causing a lot of domestic violence, within families, and women and children are suffering it most. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real challenge. I mean, first of all, our focus isn't on domestic violence specifically, but we have been trying to engage fathers and whole families more in the last few years. So we started a dad's group on Saturdays, which wasn't around during COVID, so it's another thing that's restarted. So it's dads and children to come along. Saturdays maybe a bit easier because they might be working. So we are trying to engage more fathers in parenting support. And although you're absolutely right in terms of where domestic violence comes from, there are a lot of fathers, even in families that are single parent families, who are engaged with the parenting in some way, even if it's not all the time, but in some of the time. So we're trying to take an approach which encourages that, and try to encourage dads to talk about being a parent. So that's what that space is for. I mean, other things we've done into part of our therapy offer, I mentioned that earlier. Initially, we used therapy just for children in primary schools because they're a bit older. We use creative arts and drama because it involves play and it's a safe place. But during COVID, what we found was parents wanting to, because we're doing everything online, parents were involved in the process. And we've taken that a bit forward because parents wanted to use the therapy themselves. And we've done more group creative arts therapy, and we've done more creative arts therapy with parents. I wouldn't say we've quite engaged dads so much in that process. And I think that's, you know, a continuing say a journey, a continuing pressure to engage them in that. So yeah, we're kind of touching those things. We certainly haven't solved them or made a huge difference, but we are aware of the whole family, taking a holistic approach rather than just individual children and parents, and bringing fathers in. So that's probably my waffly way of saying we haven't solved it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sister Ellen?
Yeah, hi Andy. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think something I've been thinking about is something that's come out kind of loud and clear. I've been thinking about families who are already living in poverty and the effect of the crisis on them. And it's kind of how much further into poverty can people go if they were already on the breadline? Your service, I can also sense, is kind of floundering with that same issue. So what you're asking yourselves is, how much more can we do? So on the one hand, the families are sinking into hopelessness, as you said, and you're there thinking, you know, what are the solutions? How much more? And what the whole thing I think you demonstrated to me is the struggle around that, because there's how much more is there that you can be doing? And I think it's absolutely terrific that you are totally, obviously preoccupied with the more, without being in position to offer any kind of financial assistance, but strengthening relationships and strengthening the family unit to be able to cope within itself. How much more? How much more? So I think I've kind of learned that you've demonstrated what I was already thinking about and added a dimension around trying to find solutions that actually really do help. And I think what I really loved about your presentation was you haven't found them yet. You're sort of on a journey asking yourselves every day, what is the more that we can offer? What is the more with limited resources yourselves? So I just think I was very impressed with you saying in a year's time, you might look back and be able to actually define what the more was. Because, and I think something about, this is about economic poverty, but there are so many other poverties that you're coming across and always have done, as well as the economic. So, I mean, I haven't really got a question, but I think from listening to you, those those are my reflections. I could ask myself, for all of us, what more can we be doing, either with families that we're contacting that don't come to you because they're not in your area, or what more could we be doing to support you? Because in the end of the day, people living in poverty, and particularly families, is where this is all at in this crisis. That's the platform for which we should be paying attention, because that's where it's going to really hit. So thank you, Andy, for everything you're doing, and thanks to your team as well.
Thanks. Mark?
Just a brief thing to add, really, because as well as hearing about all the need that you're facing and looking at how you can respond to it, I think one of the first things that jumped out at the start is we talk around the sense of hopelessness amongst families. And I mean, hopelessness is it's an awful word in itself, and hopelessness and children are two words that should never ever belong together. And then to hear you say that, as well as all the responses to families, the struggles, the financial struggles, the emotional and parenting struggles, that you're seeking to bring a sense of joy, I think just is incredibly reassuring, as well as the need for the immediate assistance and providing welfare advice and signposting support. Is just to hear that what the family project's always been about, that sense of community and a place where people can find joy and create joy together. I think it's it's really, really reaffirming to hear that that's not being sight's not being lost of that in the midst of a crisis, that the focus on providing joy for families and for children is at the heart of the service. So it's just, I suppose, reassuring at a time of crisis to hear that. So to thank you, really more than a question, just a thanks.
Thank you. Any last questions before we wrap up? Well, Andy, you've certainly given many practical and emotional support mechanisms for us to take away with us to help support people who are really feeling the effects of this crisis. So thank you from all of us for sharing those with us. We really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock with Sister Ellen, who will wrap up Vincentian Values Week. So please do join us tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye.